Surrounded, outnumbered 3-1. No food, no escape, no hope. Any other commander would have been crushed, but this man didn't just survive, he turned the noose into a weapon. In front of him, 80,000 warriors. Behind him, 100,000 more. And somehow, he outsmarted them all. This wasn't luck. This was pure, ruthless genius. The kind of move so shocking, it's still studied 2,000 years later.
The year is 525 BC. For 6 relentless years, Julius Caesar has been dragging his legions across the wild lands of Gaul, modern-day France, Belgium, and Switzerland. Tribe after tribe fell. Some were crushed in battle, others forced into shaky alliances. And with every victory, Caesar grew richer, more feared, and dangerously powerful back in Rome. But the Gauls weren't finished. They were tired of Roman garrisons stealing their food, tired of their lands being treated like spoils, and tired of bowing to a foreign commander. And then, out of the chaos, one man rose. A young chieftain named Vercingetorix. He wasn't just another warrior chief, he was a visionary. Where others saw endless rivalries between tribes, he saw one chance: unite them all and drive Rome out forever. Through fiery speeches and brutal discipline, he pulled off what no Gaul had done before. He forged a massive coalition. His message was simple: no more Roman chains. But unity wasn't his only weapon. Vercingetorix introduced a strategy the Romans hated most. He burned his own lands, destroyed farms and villages, and left nothing for Caesar's army to eat. And at first, it worked. The Romans were starving, stretched thin and humiliated by a crushing defeat at the town of Gergovia, Vercingetorix's own stronghold. For the first time, it looked like Caesar's unstoppable rise might finally collapse. But that was only the beginning. Caesar wasn't the kind of man you corner. After Gergovia, instead of retreating, he rebuilt his strength, 10 legions at his back, and a secret weapon, elite Germanic cavalry, riders so feared that even the Gauls whispered about them. And Vercingetorix, flushed with victory, made his move. He ordered a direct strike, his cavalry charging Caesar's marching column, hoping to scatter the Romans for good. But it backfired. Caesar unleashed his new horsemen, and they didn't just defeat the Gauls, they obliterated them. For the first time, Vercingetorix's confidence cracked. He pulled his entire army, 80,000 warriors, into a massive hilltop fortress called Alesia. It looked unbreakable: steep cliffs, rivers on both sides, walls bristling with defenders. From that fortress, he sent riders racing across Gaul with a desperate message: bring every warrior you can. Meet me at Alesia. Together, we'll crush Caesar for once and for all. It was the perfect trap. Caesar in front of the fortress, 80,000 Gauls inside, and soon an even larger relief army coming up behind. Any sane general would have fled, but Caesar wasn't sane. He saw the trap, and he decided to make it his own. What he did next, nobody could have imagined. Most generals, facing disaster, pray for a miracle. Caesar ordered his men to start digging. But this wasn't just any fortification. His plan was insane, almost suicidal. He would build 2 walls. The first, an 11-mile ring around Alesia itself, sealing Vercingetorix and his 80,000 warriors inside, cutting them off from food, water, and hope. The second, even more shocking, a 14-mile outer wall built to face outward, designed to block the massive relief army he knew was coming. Picture it: Caesar's 50,000 men trapped in a fortress-shaped donut with enemies on both sides. They weren't just besieging Alesia, they were also preparing to be besieged. And these weren't simple wooden fences. The Romans created a nightmare field of death: moats filled with water, hidden pits with sharpened stakes, iron hooks buried in the ground, and fields of deadly spikes meant to rip enemy formations apart. Behind those defenses rose ramparts, 12 feet high, towers armed with Roman artillery, and layers of traps that turned every approach into a killing zone. Meanwhile, inside Alesia, panic spread. Food was running out. In desperation, Vercingetorix drove the town civilians, men, women, and children, out of the gates, hoping Caesar would show mercy. But Caesar didn't flinch. He left them stranded between the walls to starve. Their cries echoed through the night, a brutal reminder to the Gauls that the Romans would never break. Both sides knew the real storm was still coming. And when it arrived, it was bigger than anyone imagined. Late September. On the horizon, Roman scouts spotted it, an ocean of warriors cresting the hills. The Gallic relief army had arrived. Caesar claimed there were over 250,000 men. Modern historians think closer to 100,000, but numbers aside, it was massive, enough to crush the Romans outright. And leading them, Vercingetorix's own cousin. The trap had sprung. Caesar's 50,000 legionaries were now pinned between 80,000 Gauls in the fortress and a colossal force pressing from the outside, outnumbered 3-1. The first assault thundered forward. Cavalry and infantry surged across the plain, slamming into Caesar's outer walls. At the same time, Vercingetorix's men charged from within, hammering the inner defenses. The Romans were fighting on two fronts at once. Chaos exploded. But Caesar's death trap worked exactly as designed. The moat slowed the Gallic charge. Hidden pits and spikes broke their formations. By the time they reached the walls, the once mighty attack had dissolved into a bloody mess. And then came Caesar's ace. He unleashed his Germanic cavalry. They burst through the gates like a thunderstorm, slamming into the Gallic cavalry and tearing them apart. The first wave collapsed. The relief army staggered back stunned, but they weren't done. That night, under the cover of darkness, they tried again, scaling ladders, grappling hooks, and sheer numbers. It nearly worked. In some places, the Romans were shoved off their walls, but Caesar had planned for it. He held reserves back with his most trusted men, Mark Antony and Gaius Trebonius. At the breaking point, they surged forward, plugging gaps and pushing the Gauls back into the dark. 2 assaults down, both failed. But the Gauls weren't giving up. They had found a weakness in Caesar's lines, and their next attack would be all or nothing.
The Gauls had tested the walls. They had bled, broken, and failed. But their scouts discovered something, one weak spot. To the north, a steep hill had forced Caesar to build lighter defenses and a smaller Roman camp. That was the crack in the armor, and the Gauls were ready to smash it wide open. At dawn, 60,000 of their best warriors, hand-picked for the final strike, marched silently through the night. Their mission? Crush the northern camp, rip open Caesar's defenses, and let the full relief army pour through. At midday, the attack erupted. From the outside, the 60,000 roared down on the weak point. From the inside, Vercingetorix threw his full weight against the walls of Alesia. It was chaos. Romans were collapsing under sheer numbers. The northern camp was buckling. For the first time, Caesar's men were breaking. This was the moment of truth. And Caesar rode straight into it. Wearing his blazing scarlet cloak, the symbol every soldier knew, he plunged into the melee himself. His presence electrified the legionaries. Men who were seconds from running now fought like demons at his side. But even courage wasn't enough. The Gauls still had the numbers. The Roman line wavered. One more push, and it would snap. And that's when Caesar made his final gamble. He ordered his cavalry commander, Titus Labienus, to do the unthinkable. Take a small force, leave the safety of the walls entirely, circle all the way around, and slam into the rear of the 60,000 Gauls. It was insane. If Labienus failed, Caesar's entire army would be annihilated. But then, horns echoed from behind the Gauls. Roman cavalry burst out of nowhere, charging straight into their backs.
The attackers, who thought they were moments from victory, suddenly realized they were the ones trapped. Panic swept through their ranks. What happened next would decide the fate of Gaul forever. The counterattack hit like lightning. Labienus's cavalry smashed into the Gauls from behind, while Caesar's legions roared back from the front. The 60,000 warriors who thought they were breaking the Romans suddenly found themselves trapped in a vice. Panic exploded, shields dropped, warriors fled. But the Germanic horsemen hunted them down mercilessly, cutting through the chaos. And once the relief army shattered, everything unraveled. The rest of the Gallic forces, watching from the hills, lost their will to fight. What had started as a massive, unstoppable tide dissolved into a panicked retreat. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix watched his salvation vanish. His army broken, his allies scattered, his food gone. The next day, he called his council. There were only two choices left: die by their own hands or surrender to Caesar. They chose surrender. And so came one of history's most haunting moments. Vercingetorix, dressed in his finest armor, rode out alone. He circled Caesar, dismounted, and cast his weapons at the Romans' feet. The man who nearly united Gaul now stood in chains. He would wait 6 long years in a Roman cell, only to be paraded through the streets in Caesar's triumph, then strangled in the shadows of his prison. The dream of a free Gaul died with him. But for Caesar, Alesia wasn't more than a victory. It was the final step on his path to absolute power, the triumph that gave him the wealth, the soldiers, and the prestige to one day cross the Rubicon and change Rome forever. What began as an impossible trap ended as one of the greatest displays of tactical genius in all of history. Alesia wasn't just the fall of Vercingetorix. It was the moment Caesar became unstoppable. 50,000 Romans, surrounded on all sides, had defeated nearly 3 times their number. And they did it through sheer will, brutal discipline, and one man's audacity. But victory came at a price. The starving cries of civilians left to die, the rivers of blood spilled on both sides. These shadows would follow Caesar long after the cheers of Rome faded. Some call him a genius, others call him a monster. But one thing is certain: without Alesia, there would be no Caesar the dictator, no Caesar the legend, and perhaps no Roman Empire at all. And that leaves one haunting question: was Alesia the birth of greatness or the beginning of Rome's darkest age?